Okay, so we're waiting for everybody to jump on. We'll give them just a little bit of time. Somebody asked about the Dexcom G6 and needing a transmitter or receiver. So with the Dexcom G6, it's one of the continuous glucose monitors. And yeah, you have to have the transmitter for sure with the sensors. The receiver, you don't have to have if you're going to use your cell phone, if your cell phone works. But if your cell phone doesn't work, if it's unable to download the Dexcom app, then yeah, we can send in a receiver. So anyway, just some good questions about continuous glucose monitors, which we've talked about in the past. But anytime you have any questions, kind of like what we're doing now, just send them to us in the chat and the chat screen, and we'll get those, and Haley will help us try to filter those too if I get busy with the presentation and don't catch one. Haley, if you'll help me, like remind me that I might have a message I need to look at.
Yes, and if you send it to everyone, I'll be able to see it, or if you just send it to Jill, I'll just give you a reminder every now and then to
Okay.
check the chat.
Okay. All right, well, it's 12:04 by my clock, so we'll go ahead and get started so that we don't keep you guys from your lunch. You can get back to work if that's where you're heading. But today we're talking about reading a nutritional label, breaking it down into the things that you really need to pay attention to when you have diabetes. I will not be speaking on everything that's on a nutrition label. That would take a very long presentation, and there's something maybe we could do that at some point, but I am not a registered dietitian. I'm a registered nurse, and kind of if you look at my credentials after my name, I don't always put MOM, but it's May, so it's Mother's Day is just around the corner. And so I always said whenever I became a nurse, because all the nurses and doctors, I put those initials after their names, and everyone was always like, what do those stand for? So I always said I was going to put MOM, and everyone would wonder what that stood for in the medical field, because it's not one that I don't think's used, but that just stands for mom. And it's the one degree they can't take away from you if you're a mom. So I put that closest to my name. So that was just there for kind of as to be funny. The RN is registered nurse, and the CES is certified diabetes care and educational specialist. So again, I'm not a registered dietitian. So when I talk to patients about the nutrition label, usually I talk only about those things that would pertain to them as someone who has diabetes. Prior to becoming a nurse, just to let you know, I was a teacher for 18 years. I taught in public schools and private schools, then I went back to school to be a nurse, and to become a certified diabetes care and educational specialist. I had to have like 1,000 hours of education documented, and then take the test to see if I could pass the test. Then I was allowed then to call myself a certified diabetes educator. So with that said, at Valley, I've been here since 2015, and really I got the diabetes education certificate in 2018, and started working with our endocrinologist who started at our clinic in 2018. And so from there, we're just trying to keep building the opportunities we have here at Valley to further education for anybody who wants to learn more about diabetes, not just somebody who has diabetes, but also people who have loved ones or friends who have diabetes, and you'd like to be able to help them out and learn more about how to help them to self-manage. So this year is going by quickly, but in January, when we went over things, we just reviewed kind of what the plan was for the year. And this year we really tried to get it organized so that we could put it up on our website at Valley, and you could prepare what you might be interested in, which one of the virtual education visits you might be interested in, and some that you might not. So you can make sure you got registered for the ones you really were interested in. In February, it was all about heart health. We had Jana Smith, one of our care coordinators at Clinton, who has a lot of experience with cardiology. And so she came on and was a guest host, and had a lot of good information about diabetes and the heart. And in March, we had Zach Milam, who's one of our behavioral health counselors, came on and helped to explain diabetes distress. And that was really full of information. All of those are archived on our website. If you're interested in, if you weren't able to attend, or if you want to listen to them again, that information is archived on our website. You just have to go there and click on the presentation you want to learn here again, and click on it, and it will play for you there. Today, though, is just about reading a nutrition label, and I don't have a guest host today. It is just me. So you're stuck just with me today. Okay, even though I'm sharing this, it's not letting me move my slides. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I always want to remind you, again, I meant to put in our website. I know most of you know where it is because you registered for this presentation, but those archived virtual diabetes groups slides are there. Feel free to participate today. You can raise your hand at the top. There's a little icon with a little hand. It says raise your hand. You can write a message to us and just hit enter and it'll be sent to us. And like Haley said, you can either choose just for the whole group or you can choose just to send it to her. Either way. I always like to remind everybody that before we get started, because I'm really trying to encourage any kind of questions or participation. So I know when you look at a nutrition label, because I've been participating in the diabetic group that we used to meet in person at Valley since 2015. So quite a few years, been meeting with patients one-on-one and then as a group once a month. And most of the time we end up getting to the point of a nutrition label and trying to get through it, filter through it and figure out what is it that they're saying on these labels. And I know they can seem overwhelming to find the information that you need to make good or healthy food choices. But we're going to try and break it down today one step at a time and focus just on key things you need to focus on for if you have diabetes. And with all the small print, all the words, some of the words we can't pronounce, and all the percentages and the numbers, I know it can get overwhelming. So we're going to look individually at what you need to pay attention to and take one step at a time. So I want to encourage you just to keep in mind that don't let it get overwhelming. Let's focus on just a few things this time to get you started, I guess. So these are the 4 areas we're definitely going to focus on. I'm not saying we won't hit on a few other things, but we're going to definitely look at serving size. We're going to look at the fats, carbohydrates, total carbohydrates, which will include sugar and fibers. You may have friends who are counting calories, and that's good too. You may have counted calories in the past. The thing is just that counting calories is not what it's all about when it comes to diabetes. And so that's what I mean when I say we're going to focus mostly on what a person with diabetes kind of needs to focus on. I mean, for example, bananas are low in calories, but high in sugar. But a baked chicken is high in calories, but low in carbohydrates or sugar. So you got to decide which way you're going to go. You got to kind of focus on that. You can't do it all, I guess is my point. You can count calories also if you want. However, people with diabetes really need to focus on serving size, carbs, the fiber that's in the food, and also fats, whether they're healthy fats or unhealthy fats. And we're going to talk more about that. So let's start where you should start. Start with the serving size. It's reported as a measurement or a number of items. So always start here with a serving size so that you know how much food is being described for the rest of the label, because whatever they have on the serving size, that's what those numbers pertain to, that serving size. Not everything that's in the can or everything that's in the bag, but a specific serving size. So on the label, it must be noted in household measures. That's one of the rules they have to follow, such as a cup or a number of items like 8 crackers. So we're going to look for those. We're going to have some sample nutrition labels to practice with here in a little bit. You may also have to do some measuring or some counting. If the label is for soup, you don't have to have measuring cups, but it is hard to eyeball a cup of soup, by like using the size of your fist for, like we do that with an apple. The size of your fist is about 15 grams for an apple, and the size of the palm of your hand, 3 ounces of meat and so on. But the thing is, it's really hard to eyeball a cup of soup once it's in the bowl. So sometimes it's better to go ahead and measure that out with an actual measuring cup. You need to make sure you pay attention to the servings per the container. And the information noted on the nutrition label is for 1 serving. Some snacks and some drinks actually contain more than 1 serving. So when you're drinking that 16-ounce Coke or whatever, that probably is not just for 1 person. When you're eating that whole bag of chips, that was supposed to be shared with 5 other people probably. So double checking that number of the serving size is really important. And if it contains more than 1 serving, if you're going to eat more than 1 serving, then you're going to have to do some math. You may have to double it, double the numbers. And we're going to look at that here in a little bit. If you're going to eat half the serving, then you're going to take half of what the numbers show. So let's look at some closer ones as examples. All right, so on the label on the left, you can see that 1 cup is a serving size. And it looks like maybe this is soup. It says it's a canned pasta at the top, kind of blurry, so I can't see it all, but maybe some kind of a soup. What if you wanted to eat the whole can? Well, there are actually 2 cups total in this can. So you would have to double by multiplying by 2, the number, the total fat, the total carbs, all the information on the label would need to be doubled if you're going to eat the whole can. I don't know how many of you are like me, but there are times I open up, a Campbell's soup can and I pour it in a bowl, put maybe a little water, whatever, and put it in the microwave, heat it up. Or if I'm putting it on the stove, same thing. I might find, oh, I'd like a little bit more. And sometimes you end up eating the whole can. I think this, to me, at least personally, this to me is where a problem comes in with calories that we're not even necessarily going to talk a whole lot about today. But when we aren't eating, when we're not following what the serving was recommended, then that means we're actually getting more fats, more carbohydrates, more sodium, and so on than what we ever really were meant to get. So that's where the problem usually comes in. And sometimes we'll think, well, I'm not eating that bad. I didn't have that much, but actually it is more than what the serving size was supposed to be. So you can see that this has got 7 grams of fat, even though you can't see all the other stuff on the label. I'm mainly looking at the serving size, but with 7 grams of fat, if I was going to eat the whole can, that's 14 grams of fat that I would need to count. And then look at the label on the right then. A serving size is 1 ounce or 6 chips. So you can measure ounces out if you get a little scale for, a counter scale, just kind of a small little plastic scale. I've seen them at, secondhand stores, the Goodwill, Walmart, I've seen them around Amazon, wherever you want to get one. If you like to measure out and be that precise, then definitely do that. But you can also just count out 6 chips. And I wondered how many of us have eaten just 6 chips. That's what I'm asking myself. I don't think I've ever eaten just 6 chips. But 6 chips, as you can see on here, has 7 grams of fat, it looks like, 17 grams of carbohydrates. Looks like there's 290 sodium or salt, milligrams of salt, 1 gram of fiber, 2 grams of protein. So if you're going to eat 12 chips, if you're going to eat any more than just that 6 chips, you're going to have to do some math to figure out how much carbs are you actually getting, how much fat are you actually eating, how much protein, and so on. So again, I asked, have you ever eaten just 6 chips? So let's look at this. If we were going to actually eat more, let's pretend you were doubling the serving size to just 12 chips. So doing the math, you're going to double the carbs, and you're going to have 34 carbs. Double the sodium to 580 milligrams. Double the fat to 14 grams, and double the protein to 4. So let's pretend you're going to eat the whole bag of chips, which might happen some days. And then when you come to education and we ask, okay, well, tell me what you eat. How you been doing? Well, I don't do that bad. This is where the problem comes in. It doesn't seem like it was that much to you when you were eating it, but actually, if you look at the numbers, it's quite a bit. So supposedly the whole bag has 60 chips. If you do the math, you're going to have 170 carbs, 2,900 milligrams of sodium, 70 grams of fat, and 20 grams of protein. It's kind of eye-opening when we tell ourselves we're not eating all that bad. But do we really know? Are we really aware when we're eating more than what we're supposed to? So when it comes to serving size, you might say, what is the correct serving size? Well, the correct serving size on whatever you're getting ready to eat is that 1 serving. That's what they're saying. That is the correct serving size for that food. Then I think, well, I would have somebody tell me, well, then I'll have that. And then 2 hours later, I'll have it again, and so on. And so I get, what you're saying is you may be hungry, you may want to add more servings, and you can do that, but that's where the problem might lie. So I always go back to the My Plate. When we're talking about a meal, this is the serving. Half your plate should be fruits and vegetables, and the more the non-starchy vegetables, which just means the potato, corn, and peas sets in the 25% of this plate where the starches are. And then 25% of your plate should be protein-rich foods. So when you talk about serving size and we talk about meals, this is based on a 9-inch plate. we were talking about snacks, again, about 15 carbohydrates for a snack, one snack a day. That I always tell everybody, you could break that snack up if you wanted to break that 15 carb snack and have half of it, between breakfast and lunch and half between lunch and dinner. That's fine. But when it comes to a meal and it comes to a serving size, whatever is on that can, that box, that bag of chips, those crackers, that is really what one serving is supposed to be. And we really should just be having one serving for that meal. All right, so let's break down the nutritional fact label. And the first thing on the label after the serving sizes and bypassing calories, because like I said, we're going to talk about calories a little later, but I'm not talking about calories so much right now with blood sugar, because what breaks down in our body when we eat the food we eat that affects blood sugar most is carbohydrates. I will agree that, fats can have an effect and so on, but I tell all my patients that I meet with that until we get carbohydrates under control, I'm not real worried about a lot of other things, but we're worried about fats. If you remember back to our heart health when Janice spoke, we're worried about fats, specifically two specific ones, because of their effect on what they can do to our vessels. And if our blood vessels are already being damaged by the high sugar, then we definitely don't need to add some of those unhealthy fats that can also do damage to our vessels. So that's why we're going to talk about we're going to talk about fats, the different fats, and then total fats also. So here are some labels. Notice on the apple, I kind of like the apple where you can see there's no trans fats, there's no total fat in a piece of fruit. But in the two cakes on the other side, on the label on the left, there's 7 grams of total fat. The fats that evidently, total fat food labels must list, no matter what, they have to list saturated fats and trans fats. That is one of the rules when a manufacturer is making food. And you can see that on both of these labels, saturated and trans fats, both are listed, whether it's 0 or it has a number after it. They have to list them. These two fats are closely related with raising your LDL and your triglycerides on your cholesterol. We talked about that in February. Those are two labs you're probably very aware of. Your doctors order LDL or cholesterol lipid levels. I'm not sure what you call them on your side, but we call them lipids, we call them cholesterol. But the LDL stands for low density lipoprotein, and then the triglycerides, those both are the fats that can do damage to our vessels. So that's why we're more concerned about those. Those are the two we want to be low if you're going to choose when you're looking at the fats. You want to try to limit the amount of saturated and trans fats that you have in the food choices you're making. They are correlated with a higher risk for heart disease and blood vessel diseases, and both are also common complications. And with diabetes, a lot of times when we're taking we have labs for someone who has diabetes, we're checking their cholesterol, and almost always the LDL and the triglycerides are also high with someone who has uncontrolled blood sugar. I shouldn't say diabetes, because if your blood sugar is well controlled, then you're at just as much risk as anybody else in the community. But if you have uncontrolled blood sugar or very high blood sugar is what I'm talking about, then there's a good chance when I look at your labs, I'm going to also see triglycerides and your LDL is very high. So paying attention to total fat is important because fat is the most concentrated source of calories. There are 9 calories per each gram of fat. It's better to get less of this area. 5% or less is better, and 20% more is too high. So if you're going to look at percentages, but overall, if you're looking at grams, you're going to aim for definitely less than 65 grams of total fat per day. So the moral of this story is, if you can choose something like this apple that has 0% fat compared to the 2 cakes that have saturated fats, then you're going to want to choose the apple. And I don't think that that's rocket science. I think you probably already knew that, but I like how they put the label on there and it makes it clear. That's why fruit in general is sometimes a better choice when you're going to have a snack than what these snack cakes would be. Let's look closer at some fats, because we have this handout, and I think I gave this handout to Haley to post also so that you can print it out, because I had to divide it because it's a 8.5 by 11 sheet. But we often use this with our patients, the fat facts, because there are healthy fats, and these two, the monosaturated fats and the polyunsaturated fats, are the healthier fats, meaning they have more omega-3s in them, and omega-3s help control our cholesterol. And I don't think olives or olive oil is probably a surprise to most of you. But because that's talked about a lot, having omega-3s and being a healthier oil. But I just wanted to let you know that there are healthy fats. So if your food label has monounsaturated fats or polyunsaturated fats, those are the ones that are okay to have more of, because they are the healthier choices. On the polyunsaturated, the snacks of like the sunflower seeds, or adding ground flaxseed to food. The ground flaxseed, you can find that in the baking aisle. I find it at Walmart in the baking aisle, or Kroger's at the baking aisle. They used to have ground flaxseed also back in the next to the supplements at Walmart. But that's something you can add to, you can sprinkle on a salad, you can use it for breading, and it's another way of getting that healthy fat into your diet, which can, again, has the omega-3s and can help with your cholesterol levels. Walnuts especially are high in omega-3, so again, another healthy fat. Start eating fish at least twice a week, more often if you can or would like to. But these are healthy fats, so I don't want everybody to think fats are all bad and you can't have any. There are good fats, so try to focus on them. This next slide, though, saturated fats and trans fats are the ones, again, we just talked about. Those are the ones you want to try and stay away from. Those are the ones you really would like to have, no more than 5% of in a day. But this should not be a surprise to you also, especially the bottom row, the trans fats, anything that's deep fried, the snacks that you get with crackers and cookies and pies, anything made with lard or Crisco type of stuff is going to have the trans fats in it. Those are damaging to your vessels. And when you have diabetes, blood sugar is, if you have uncontrolled blood sugar, that sugar in your vessels is damaging the vessels, the interior of the vessels, and then the fats have a chance or a place to hook onto and do their damage. And so that's why we talk about hopefully eating more healthy fats and staying away or eating less of the saturated or trans fats. When they put chicken or poultry on the saturated, and that's because of the skin. So if you remove the skin, and I think the next slide's going to tell, I'm pretty sure I put that on there. Yeah, it kind of goes over that. Like if you're going to, these are the enjoy more often fats: olive, canola, vegetable oils, nuts and seeds, avocados, low fat products, dairy products, and choose lean meats, skinless poultry, and so on. So this gives you a little bit more. And then limit foods that are high in saturated and trans fats. Think about those foods like butter and lard, shortening, gravies and cream sauces. This again is all about fat. We're not talking about carbohydrates right now, but full fat milk, hot dogs, sausage, bacon, all of those of course have more fat. Deep fried foods. I don't think any of this is probably surprising to you, but it's just pointing out, sometimes you wonder, how am I going to put together a meal? Start focusing more on the enjoy more often and limit, and stay away from the limit foods that are on the right side of the slide there. And again, that handout is attached, so you can print that out and look at that some more. Healthy cooking tips, again, on the back of that handout that Haley posted. So trimming visible fat, that's something that we've all been told for many years. Drain the fat when you're cooking it. Baking is better, or roasting or grilling. Choosing a low-fat option whenever you're choosing a dairy product, and use olive oils like olive oil or canola oil are better choices over butter or margarine when cooking or baking. We do need fat. It's not like we don't need it. That's why I don't want to talk about fat as being bad or good. I try and stay away from bad and good, those words anyway. There are healthy fats and you definitely need them. So don't think you're going to go low. Don't go low fat. I mean, I guess you can go low fat if you're staying away from trans and saturated, but don't give up fat completely. Try to focus more on the healthy fats like the unsaturated and the polyunsaturated. But on the food label, like I said earlier, the rule is they have to list the trans and the saturated fats. And now you know why. Those are the ones that are damaging to our vessels. So they're like, hey, you got to limit, you got to put each one of those for the consumer so they know what they're getting. All right, so let's look at total carbohydrates, because this is what most of the time I'm encouraging my patients to look at first is carbohydrates, because when broken down in our body, it breaks down into sugar. And under the heading of total carbohydrates, you'll find also a heading called dietary fiber and sugar. And if you look at the sugars on this label, you can see that it doesn't look too bad. It says it's less than 1. So it actually doesn't look too bad. But we pay attention to carbohydrates because it can raise blood sugar. And if you look under, like, you can see total carbs on this label, and it's in bold. And so that's how all the labels look, excuse me. The total carbs will be in bold, and then the dietary fiber, the sugars, everything that, and under there could be also sugar alcohols, everything that comes underneath total carbs or total carbohydrates will be listed and kind of indented and listed and not in bold. So just wanted to point that out, because a lot of people don't realize all of that underneath the total carbs is already in the total carbohydrate number. You don't have to do the math for that. We're going to look specifically at some labels on this also. The manufacturers may voluntarily list other sources, but they don't have to. They could list things like insoluble or soluble fiber, other carbohydrates like sugar alcohols, but evidently it's not, at least from what I had learned, what I was looking through, it's not a requirement. So you may see some labels that have very little underneath total carbohydrates, or you may see some other words, but whatever those are, all that total is under or added into the total carbohydrates. So when making carbohydrate related nutrition claims, such as sugar-free on the food package, manufacturers must list related sources of carbohydrates on the label. So if you look at the front of the package and it says sugar-free, always turn it over and look under total carbs and see if it truly is sugar-free. Sometimes when there's less than a certain amount of sugar or a certain kind, they don't have to list it, and it's not, or they can advertise it as sugar-free. And then you'll turn it over and look under total carbs, or you'll look under sugars, and there's still some sugar in it. So always look at the back at the nutrition label. If they're going to call it sugar-free on the front, turn it over, see if that's true. If you think it, after we talk about some of the examples coming up, if you think it'll affect your blood sugar or not. So let's look. Oh, one of the questions a lot of people ask, your goal for fiber a day is about 25 grams, give or take. If you're, male, female, a little bit more for males, a little bit less, I think, for females. But in general, about 25 grams of fiber a day is what nutritionists usually suggest. Fiber helps digest food, helps you feel fuller longer. But a lot of people ask this question, since fiber comes underneath total carbs, can you subtract that from your total carbs? Most people that ask this are the patients who are want to go on a low carb diet, and so they're wanting to know, can I actually subtract that then, the fiber from total carbs? The American Diabetic Association recommends adjusting carbohydrate calculation for high fiber foods. So the definition of a high fiber food is a serving with 5 grams of fiber or more per serving. So foods with high fiber are a healthy addition to a meal plan. Since fiber is not completely digested and absorbed, a high fiber meal would not provide as much carbohydrate as a low fiber meal. So think of the apple that have more fiber compared to like a snack cake. When there are 5 or more grams of fiber per serving, you can subtract the total grams, subtract the fiber from the total grams of carbohydrates to determine how many carbs will actually have an effect on your blood sugar. However, with all of that said, fiber is good for your body. It doesn't always digest completely, so it can control blood sugar. We're going to look at an example of that here in a second. And it's going to help control the foods that have higher, it's going to help limit, I guess, the glycemic limit. We're going to actually look at some examples of foods that have less effect on your blood sugar because they have more fiber. And this is saying if the food, to be able to subtract it from the total carbs, you've got to have a high fiber food, or that serving of, that they're suggesting on the nutrition label has to have greater than 5 grams. Most of the time when I work with patients, this is too much information for them, to have to remember, oh yeah, it has to have more than 5 grams of fiber before I can subtract it. We finally get to the point where, like, if you're not dosing insulin based on your carbohydrate intake, so one, if you're not taking insulin, you don't have to worry about it. 2, if you are taking insulin, but you're not dosing it based on your carbohydrate intake, then we don't even worry about the 5 grams. I usually tell my patients, yes, go ahead and subtract the dietary fiber from your total carbs. So in the case of this one, you can see the food label, total carbs is 13, dietary fiber is 3. If you want to, you can subtract the 3 from the 13, and that'll tell you how many carbohydrates will actually have effect on your blood sugar. But what the ADA is saying is that the more fiber that's in there, the less effect it can have. And so they really didn't want you to subtract it unless it was over 5. So in this case, they would say, no, you can't subtract the fiber from the total carbs. You got to go with the 13. Again, I think that sometimes when I'm working with patients who are doing low carb and don't have diabetes, and so it's hard to go back and forth, and I always, whatever the patient wants to do. Most of the time people are okay not subtracting the fiber because they would rather pay more attention to what exactly is the carbohydrates that are in the food. So if they do have a question, we do talk about it, but otherwise, if you're, again, if I'm saying, if you're not in an insulin, don't worry about it. You can go ahead and subtract the fiber. If you are not dosing, if you are on insulin, but you're not dosing your insulin based on the carbs that you're eating, then again, it's not that big of a deal. To play it safe and to actually be healthier, it would be better just not to subtract the fiber at all and go with what the total carbs are. So let's look a little bit closer as to why this works. So I'm sorry, this picture's kind of blurry. It didn't look as blurry on mine, but it's looking blurry here. But this is a picture of your small intestines and all of those finger-like little projections. The food moves through your intestines, and these little finger-like projections, this is where the nutrients are absorbed. And the fiber that you eat ends up being like a gel-like substance that moves through the fringe of the cells and in the small intestines. And this gel, the fiber gel, and the little finger-like things delays the absorption of glucose from the small intestines into the bloodstream. That's why high fiber foods have less effect on your blood sugar. Let's look at, it's an abbreviated list of glycemic index, and kind of get a better idea of how this works when it's moving through your intestines. So this is a sheet, it's abbreviated because I had to cut it off from what fit on my screen, but I always go over the glycemic index of foods with patients because there are better choices than other choices, and it's because of the fiber. Again, we're all talking about blood sugar, and we're talking about somebody who has diabetes or trying to limit their carbohydrate or effective blood sugar on their body. So the glycemic index is literally just that. What, if you were to eat this food, kind of how much would your blood sugar go up? And when someone who has diabetes, what are we worried about? Blood sugar goes up. And I always tell everybody, when we were real young, when there was never a problem with blood sugar and we didn't have diabetes before that, our body, we could eat a candy bar and literally in 2 hours, our body would work to bring that blood sugar down to the 80 to 140, which is what our goal is. But if you have diabetes, if you've been diagnosed with that, then what's going on is your body does not work the way it used to bring blood sugar down in 2 hours. We're hopeful that in 4 hours before the next meal, your blood sugar will be down to 80 to 140. Our goal would be in 2 hours, it's down to 80, between 80 and 140, but definitely before the next meal. When you eat foods that are high in glycemic, have a high glycemic index, it causes your blood sugar to spike. And then when you have diabetes and your blood sugar is not being controlled well, whether it's, whether you don't have the medication, whether it's the food choices, all kinds of things play into why blood sugar can be uncontrolled. But as you have diabetes, most of the time we realize that your pancreas is not releasing enough insulin. And not only that, but maybe your cells are resistant to the insulin. So again, the sugar is staying in the blood and not getting to the cells where it belongs. So if blood sugar goes up, if you eat white bread, and so I'm looking at the far right column that says, please avoid or limit. White bread, bagels, Cheerios, hamburger buns, grape nuts, sugary cereals of any kind, those foods cause blood sugar to spike. And then because with diabetes, it takes longer for blood sugar to come back down. By the next meal in 4 hours, blood sugar is still high. If you choose a food in the good choice column, and again, I don't like to use good and bad for food, but that's what they have on this handout. These foods, this is just 2 areas, breads and breakfast cereals, have more fiber. So they're going to control that blood sugar. As it's working its way through these finger-like projections in your intestines, it's going to brush across these, and that gel that the fiber forms is going to cause it to slow down. Digestion is going to slow down, and it's going to not allow the body to have such, or allow that sugar to have such an effect on your blood. So these are better choices over white bread. Try to choose whole wheat breads, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. If you don't like anything in this first column for bread or for cereal, go to the second column and look at the choices there and see if you can find something in at least the good column or the middle column. I always encourage everyone to try and go all the way to the left to the good choice. But if you can't find anything there that works, then go to the middle column. And it's not that you can't have something in the far right column, the please avoid or limit. It's that is where you want to limit, or you definitely want to limit how much you're going to eat. You're going to want to measure out your Cheerios, even though they tell you that there's heart health with them. Instant oatmeal, I've had patients who, and I may have an example of that, but instant or oatmeal in general may be digested a little differently. Again, you'll know this personally for yourself and when you check blood sugar after the meal. But I've had patients who say that, when they dose insulin, because they're on a insulin to carb ratio, they literally have to give more insulin because oatmeal affects their blood sugar so much. Even though the slow cook, if you look in the middle column, there's oatmeal slow cook. Even if they eat that, it doesn't matter that it's not instant. Even if it's instant, it doesn't have sugar in it. They still has a huge effect on their blood sugar. So even though this is something for us to kind of try to follow, you're going to find certain foods that even though there's a lot of fiber in it, it seems like it's still going to have a pretty high effect on your blood sugar. And you'll know that by, if you do an experiment, check your blood sugar before the meal, check it about 2 hours after, see if your blood sugar is back down to 8140. Check it before the next meal. Is blood sugar down to 8140? Has it come down at all? And then think back about what it was that you ate that maybe caused that blood sugar to go high and didn't have enough fiber, or even if it did have some, didn't allow it to come down to our goal of 80 to 140. Again, these are just in general, but everybody's body digests food a little bit different. But this is just a general guide to follow and trying to choose more foods that have high fiber. What about protein? Protein does not affect your blood sugar. You need protein in your diet to help regulate red blood cells, immune system, your hormones, repair damaged tissue. It's very important, but it doesn't affect blood sugar, and you should aim for about 20 grams per meal or 50 to 60 grams per day. Choosing small, lean portions of meat, fish, and poultry are the best choices. And you can always try to get some protein in other forms, like with beans. Even though they do have more carbohydrates, they also have quite a bit of fiber. Sodium is another thing that does not affect blood sugar, but it can cause your body to hold on to water. And so does a high carb diet. Both of those can cause us to kind of either to have an inflammatory reaction and more or less have more water, and then the sodium holding on. You may notice some swelling in your hands or feet, or a rise in blood pressure. So you really should be limiting your sodium intake unless someone's told you to limit it even more. Less than 2,300 milligrams a day, or even actually that's like a little less, I think, than a teaspoon. And a pinch of salt is approximately 400 milligrams. Because I tell everybody this, there's a food label there, and that's real helpful because you can see there's 930 milligrams of sodium in this food label, whatever this food is. And that's okay, but what if you're cooking an egg and you want to add a little salt? So just in general, a teaspoon of salt or 2,300 milligrams is a little bit less than a teaspoon, and a pinch of salt, just a pinch, is think of that as 400 milligrams. So I think clearly what we can learn from that is try to limit your salt. And doesn't take very much to equal up to that 2,300 milligrams, and that's a day. And again, if your other doctors have told you to limit that even more, then follow their instructions. This is just in general, if you just have diabetes or no other chronic conditions. All right, so we're going to look at some specific nutrition labels and try to work out figuring serving size, carbs, fibers, net carbs, how much bad fat is there in them, and so on. And we're going to try to follow the same step each time so that as we work through the labels, you'll kind of get used to the pattern and maybe be able to, once you go to the store, read the labels on your own. And hopefully it'll help filter out some of the words and all the small print and so on. But these are just blueberries. I usually use frozen blueberries, so it doesn't matter if they're fresh or frozen. But let's look at this, because everybody's always like, oh, I shouldn't eat fruit because it's full of sugar. And I always encourage them, to make the decision if you're going to eat a candy bar or a piece of fruit. A piece of fruit is going to have a whole lot more good stuff for you than what a candy bar would have. So the serving size is 1 cup for this. And if you look at this food label, total number of servings, this one did not have a specific total number of servings on it. It could be because if it was fresh fruit, it may not have that, but it may not, each one of the pints may be a little bit different. But if you're going to actually have a serving, then you would need to measure this out with an actual measuring cup. Total carbohydrates for 1 cup of blueberries is 21 grams of carbs. There is fiber, and it's only 4 grams. So again, it's below that 5. They said you needed 5 or above to be able to subtract it from the 21. So this is up to you. Oftentimes, while I'm trying to eat low carb, I'll go ahead and subtract the 4. If I'm really trying to watch it, I'm like, no, I'm not going to be kind to myself. I'm not giving those 4. I'm going to go ahead and count the 21. So that's up to you. But of course, if you subtracted the 4, you would only have 17 grams per cup of blueberries. If we look at total fats, both saturated and trans fats are 0, just like that apple was. So again, when we're talking about something that's healthy or maybe healthier for us, that's why fruit's not a bad choice. It has 1 gram of protein, I think it says. But overall, and even a cup of blueberries is quite a bit, actually, when you do frozen blueberries. It's a nice snack on a hot summer evening. And it can really hit the spot because it's cold. It can take the place of ice cream, a much healthier choice. All right, how about, let's look at this label. Can you think of a better late night snack than a bowl of cereal? So that's why I chose a bowl of cereal. And this label is actually based on Raisin Bran. So as you look at this label, you can see at the very top, the serving size is 1 1/4 cup of cereal. I suggest you definitely measure out your cereal. If you're like me and you go get your favorite bowl and you fill it up, there's a good chance you're not limiting yourself to 1 1/4 cup. I suggest you try it. Fill up your favorite bowl and then actually take that out and measure it and see how much more you're eating. Like I said, I find that as patients come in, they think, I'm not really eating that much. I'm not really eating that bad. It could literally just be that the serving sizes are getting larger than what they actually should be. The true serving size is just 1 1/4 cup, no matter how large your bowl is. Total number of servings. I think this one also didn't give. Yeah, this one has an X. It didn't give per servings per container. Didn't give it. You can't, I don't know that you can actually, you might be able to see it. I can't see it on the screen, but I can see it on my slides that it doesn't actually give a serving, how many servings per container. Yeah, and I don't know that we really care. If you're going to measure out 1 1/4 cups, then you'll know they're serving for each individual serving. Let's see, total number of servings not given, total number of carbs. If we go down past the fats, all the way down to total carbs, 48 grams. Again, underneath there, it divvies out some of it to dietary fiber, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, and total sugars. And remember, I said earlier that sometimes their labels will actually add all of them, but what they're only required to add are total sugars and fiber. They don't have to put in soluble or insoluble. So this one did. That's kind of interesting. Remember, soluble means that we're able to break it down. Insoluble means we're not able to break it down in our body. So if we, and this one has quite a few fibers. So if we subtract that, you can subtract that from the total carbs. If you look back up, I'm sorry, I went past the fats. If you look back up at the fats, saturated and trans and polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, remember that the two they have to put on there are the saturated and the trans fats. Those are the ones that are required to be on every label, and they have 0. The polyunsaturated and the monosaturated are the healthier fats, and all of them are 0. But look at the total fat. It has that 1 gram. So that can kind of confuse people. It's like all of them said 0. Well, keep in mind also that part of manufacturer guidelines is that they don't have to report things that if it's not over a certain percentage or a certain amount of the food. So I'm not quite sure exactly how much is in this the Raisin brand that I chose here, but it could be that the total fat, even though there's 1 gram, when added together individually, they might have had like 0.5 or something grams. And so they didn't actually have to write it there next to the saturated or the trans, but they had to put it in the total fat as 1 gram. All right, so no matter what kind of potato it is, you got to really pay attention to the nutrition label. And it could just be a plain old regular white potato, baked potato. Those have got quite a few carbohydrates in them. So paying attention as you're counting out serving size for sure. The serving size on this bag of frozen French fries is about 14 pieces. 3 ounces. So again, if you have one of those scales and you want to measure them out by scales, by ounces, go for it. But you literally can just count out the 11 pieces. I think the problem comes in with me with those 11 pieces. When you have frozen French fries, sometimes there's bigger frozen French fries and sometimes there's little ones. And you're like, which one is it? Do I take a little one or the big one to make my 11? So that's where if you had one of the scales, it would actually be nice because you could actually measure out the true, whether it was a large French fry or a small, those 3 ounces, and you'd have a closer idea of what your serving size is. I think the thing to keep in mind is you're not always going to be exactly, right on the nail. You don't always have to be, but if you're getting close, you're going to be doing the right thing. So if you measured out your 11 French fries and limited yourself to that, you're going to have total fat 4 grams, and one of those is coming from saturated fat. It says there's no trans fat, but again, it could have a small amount that wasn't enough that they had to put a number next to it, but it actually adds up into the total fats. Total carbs are 13 and only 2 dietary fibers, so you really should not subtract that from the 13. And protein, 1 gram. So overall, if you limit yourself to 11 French fries, it's not quite so bad. And if you think about it, and go back to the My Plate, those 11 French fries would fit in that 25% or that quarter of your 9-inch plate very well. That's what we're talking about when you go back to the My Plate. You can use that to guide you into serving sizes because about 11 little French fries are going to fit just fine flat there. Now, if you pile them up, that's breaking the rules. But if you put them out flat, yeah, there's probably about room for 11 French fries. So again, think about it. Have you only eaten just 11 fries? Or are you grabbing, a handful? Or are you just kind of filling half your plate? That's what you got to start paying attention to when you're choosing serving sizes and you're trying to pay attention to carbohydrates and what can affect blood sugar. So this is one, to me, it's that time of the year when I start thinking about ice cream because it's warming up. And the thing that surprised me, and maybe this is not a surprise to you, but the serving size, a half a cup. I'm not sure when I've only ever eaten just a half a cup of ice cream. Literally, get a half a cup and try it. Maybe it'll be enough. This is one of those very small containers that you see in the store. So there's 4 half cup servings in there. Most of those small containers I look at and go, okay, that'd be a nice thing just to have those. I could grab one of those containers. Well, I could grab one of those containers, but I shouldn't be eating the whole container, even though it's very small. So literally a half a cup is the serving size. So when you come in to talk to the care coordinators about eating healthy, or you talk to me, keep in mind, are you truly following the serving size or are we overeating? And because we're doubling or tripling or quadrupling that half a cup, we have to quadruple the total carbs. So if you were able to eat just a half a cup, there would be 15 grams of fat, and there are some saturated fats in there. Those are the more unhealthy fats that we want to limit. The sodium is 80 milligrams for just a half a cup. Total carbs, 28. And if we go with you can't subtract the dietary fiber unless it's over 5 grams, there's only 1 gram here. So even if you did subtract it, so it's 27 carbs. And then multiply that times 4 if you ate the whole container. And again, remember that you've probably seen these in the freezer section. This is the very, very small little container that doesn't look hardly big enough for just one serving. I think that's, to me, where the problem's coming in is when we ignore the serving sizes and we think we're not doing that bad, but when we actually do the math, we're like, oh, that's where all those carbohydrates are coming from. So, but I have found the perfect food. So I'm not sure if you've ever run into this perfect food. I have to say it is one of my favorites because, especially on a hot summer day. But anytime a patient wants to follow a low carb, low calorie, low fat diet, I always refer them to the one food that I know would meet all of their expectations, and that is a bag of ice. So I will agree that ice is refreshing, and I'm very thankful for it. Like I said, on a hot summer day or evening, sitting on the front porch when I'm having some iced tea, I love it. But we can't live on ice alone forever. I mean, you could live on it for a while, but not forever. And I don't know how filling and you know, how long it would keep you satisfied. So I'm encouraging not, you know, as you look at this, again, what's the serving size? It's like, you know, the whole pound of ice has 0 in it. You could eat the whole pound of ice and be fine. But it's difficult when you have diabetes. I have patients who want to follow a low calorie diet. They want to follow a low fat diet. And we're looking at carbohydrates. And I let them know, if you're going to follow all those kind of healthy or those kind of eating plans, watching carbohydrates, watching calories, watching fats, you're going to have a really hard time finding foods that satisfy you. So you don't have to give up everything. You don't have to live on ice alone. You can still choose and find healthy foods and stay within those serving sizes so that you can help control blood sugar by limiting those carbohydrates, or eating those carbohydrates or eating those foods that have higher fiber so they have less effect on your blood sugar. There's a whole lot we can do without having to resort to eating just ice alone. Some other things that are on nutritional labels, sorry, past it, that we didn't even get into, but you might want to pay attention to and try to avoid. There are different words for the word sugar. So you're not always going to just see the word sugar on your list. There's anhydrous dextrose, cane crystals, cane sugar, because there's sugar, corn sweetener, corn syrup, fructose, which is of course fructose sweetener is what it says, but fructose is the sweetness or the sugar from fruits. Fruit juice concentrates, high fructose corn syrup, honey, of course, malt syrup, molasses, lactose, maltose, carbidol. There are all kinds of words for sugar. So sometimes if you look at there and it says, you know, there's some sugar, but you look at the bottom and you're looking, what is the first ingredient? What's the second ingredient in this food I'm getting ready to eat? Again, this is listed on the nutrition label, usually near the bottom of what's in this food, what is in this product that you're getting ready to buy. Look for these words and realize that there are other forms that sugar comes and might be playing a part in that total carbohydrate. I also highlighted, besides there's other things here, and the slides will be available for you to look back through, but I also highlighted the partially hydrogenated oils. This is a trans fat. One of those fats we're really trying to limit and stay away from are the trans fats. Don't confuse zero trans fat with being trans fat free, because the FDA does allow a 0 for trans fat if there's less than 0.5 grams per serving. So if the food has 0.49 grams per serving, it can have a 0 trans fat on the label. You're really not supposed to have any more than 2 grams of trans fats a day. So those could add up quickly with a lot of 0.49s. These trans fats are found mostly in things that are bought from the store, like sweets, frozen pizzas, microwave popcorn, whipped toppings, even bread and instant mashed potatoes, pasta mixes, you know, the noodle soup cups, cocoa mixes, crackers, all kinds of things have trans fats. But if it's less than 0.5, they can put 0 on the food label. So keep that in mind too. So those are 2 I really wanted to highlight, that there are other things on nutritional label that we couldn't spend because we're already almost out of time. So I'm going to finish this up, but let me get to the next slide. There are some resources for you if you're really wanting to pay attention to breaking down your carbohydrates, your proteins, your sodium and everything. But MyFitnessPal does that really well. There's a lot of girls here that use that and swear by it. Another one that I found is Fujifilm. Apple and Android is free through them. Same thing, they're going to give you some individualized nutrition information about food. Calorie King is always a good one to use. And there's even a book. If you're old fashioned, want to get the book, you can buy the book from the bookstore or off of Amazon. And then the American Diabetes Association is always a place to go for more information also. I know reading food labels can be difficult, but I suggest you focus just on those 4 things we talked about at the very beginning, go one step at a time. Even just take one of them, like start with serving size. And work on that for a few weeks to see if you're actually following the correct serving size. Start checking yourself. If you fill your bowl up, your favorite bowl up, take that out and actually measure it and then compare it to what the label said. Did you give yourself more or less than what the label said was a serving size? Start with just serving size and do that for a few weeks till you get that under your belt, and then start looking at carbohydrates. Again, if we're talking about diabetes, let's start with carbohydrates, the things that affect blood sugar the most. And again, spend weeks on that, getting that under your belt, and then go on to fats and staying away from trans and saturated fats. Use that Fat Facts handout to focus more on the monosaturated and polyunsaturated fats. Again, take a few weeks and work just on the fats until you get that under your belt. It doesn't have to all be done at once. You can do it a little bit at a time. And at that point, you'll become an expert at reading nutrition labels. Then in May, well, it's May now, but because I'm sorry, we had to change the date on the nutrition label presentation there were technology that was technical difficulties, I guess they call it, that we couldn't do it last Monday. But May 23rd is the actual presentation for May. And it's going to be about going shopping. I have so many people asking, okay, I got to eat healthy. I'm supposed to eat more fruits and vegetables and protein, the meat, everything's expensive, and especially now. So I'm going to go shopping and try to put together some recipes that are low in carbohydrates, diabetic friendly dishes, trying to find the most affordable options. And we're going to actually take you to the store where we actually either film, take pictures of these things, and then the food choices, the prices, and then we're going to actually put them together so you can see the final dish to see if you might like it. As close as I can get is you actually trying the dishes, actually cooking it for you and taking pictures. When we used to meet in person, we would bring these foods in and we'd all try them, and that way it gave you an option to try it before you actually went and bought the ingredients and tried to make it yourself and maybe didn't like it. But since we can't do that, we're not doing that this year, I'm going to try the best we can to give you pictures and give you a description of the food. So that's our goal, is to help you find, and I think it's going to be a hard one to meet this now because prices have gone up so much. I had made this idea up months ago. I'm like, oh yeah, this will be easy. And now I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to have to work really hard on trying to find the affordable part. So look forward to seeing you then on May 23rd at 12 o'clock. And were there any questions, comments, or anything that I missed? I don't know if let's see.
I didn't see any, but maybe check your chat to see if anybody reached out to you.
Yeah, there's one that says, what do you consider high blood sugar? So again, our goal is that your blood sugar would be between 80 and 140. That's our goal, that we'd love it to be there all the time. Anything over 140 would be considered high blood sugar. If you have a continuous glucose meter, a CGM, they have the report set up so that your blood sugar would stay between 70 and 180. That's their goal. 180 is the kidney threshold. That means that after 180, the kidneys have a really hard time getting rid of the sugar. That's one of the things that our kidneys do. They filter out wastes, and they also filter out extra sugar, and they try to get it out. You pee it out, you try and get rid of it. But once it's over 180, the kidneys just can't keep up. So our goal is definitely below 180. Again, if you have a continuous glucose monitor, but even once you have one of those, we really try to get between the 80 and 140. Not all the time. Clearly, after you eat a meal, blood sugar is going to go up. But before that next meal, we'd like it back down to 80 to 140. If I have patients who are able to keep their blood sugar between 80 and 140 all the time, they work at it a lot, and they really, that's their goal. That's what they want to work on. And so they spend a lot of time on that. But I encourage everybody, like the ADA, the American Diabetic Association does, is live life, enjoy life. You know, you're going to go to a birthday party at some point. You're going to have a piece of birthday cake. You know, Christmas is going to roll around, and there's going to be some Christmas cookies. You know, there's going to be times your blood sugar is going to go up, but you do all that you can do to try to eat as healthy as you can. So during those times when you do have those special events, those traditional meals that might make blood sugar go up a lot or some, it doesn't go up and stay up, that you know, continue to work on other healthy choices. But for the most part, our overall blood sugar should be 80 to 140 all the time. And if not all the time, before every meal. So when you wake up in the morning, that's our goal. Before lunch, that's our goal. Before dinner, that's our goal. Before you go to bed, that would be our goal, with small rises in between when you ate, you know, that meal. Any other questions? That's the only one I see, except I got a patient who asked about the receiver. We need to send a receiver for the CGM. So I got that, and I'll look into that and get that to the provider.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll sign off then.